Mm. So there was a practice that I suggested last week that you do this week, for this week, and that was to do what's referred to as a mindful hugging practice, where you, if you can, the opportunity arises, hug your child or spouse or friend. And with your spouse and your child, you can stay with it, but don't force anything. I'm not done yet. So you don't want to do that. You did.
Yeah.
Did he stay with you?
Yeah, but it's fun because you can feel like he's done. But I was kind of putting pressure on him. No.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm not done yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Lock in. Yes. There's a mindfulness couple counseling practice where this therapist, psychologist, will have the couple hugging each other for a full minute. Then over a period of time, it creates a shift. Because initially, we're good with a little bit, but a lot could be overwhelming. So this psychologist, part of that practice is you're going to stay the full minute, and he will count down full minute. But after a while, that's it. He doesn't have to monitor that, and then it becomes so natural. And there are many such practices that can instill that kind of consciousness and compassion that over time with practice, as I have stated before, peace cannot be a practice. It cannot be a decoration, right? You have to sustain some kind of practice. Any practice that has to do with, I think, gratitude or humility, compassion, provides for you perspective. Those three components provides for you perspective. I know I've asked before, you have your practice that helps cultivate that for yourself. That is fantastic. Continue doing it. My teacher made mention to me that my compassion will be my practice for the rest of my life. So anytime I notice my breath, breathing in, I feel compassion, breathe out, I extend that in kind. Anytime I step, walk, every step is an act of compassion. Eat, even sitting, being aware, noticing. Compassion emanates compassion. So you can choose that for yourself if you consider, let's say, with parenting, whatever trait that inspires you. I had a client who said to me, grace will be my practice for the rest of my life. So that was her practice. So what you do is select one of those explicit or implicit qualities, and you hold on to it, and through your daily activity or experiences, it arises in everything you do. And then when you do that sufficiently, you become efficient and it becomes embodied. Before you know it, you're walking out of compassion, yes, for all sentient beings, or you're drinking out of compassion for all sentient beings, opening, closing a door, driving, feeling the steering wheel. That becomes ultimately your object of your presence. I have to tell you a story, a quick one. Harlow and Jasmine, I took them home today, the both of them, and then we were driving back here. I was trying to mind my own business as I was eavesdropping, and I hear one say to the other, "Moms are awesome!" I'm just minding my own business. Take note, Dad was driving, so there was that immediate, interesting. Okay, they were unconscious at the time. they didn't mean anything by it. But a conversation led to moms, and then one said to the other, and the other responded by saying, I know. And it made me think on the way here, that's the very thing that I have been discussing with you all the past 3 weeks. And I will continue that conversation right now. You see the significance of what that means and the association? A child's identity, I guess no matter what age, if you think about it, is wrapped around that whole notion. Mom or mothers or parents, dads too. I'll be willing to admit we're second, at least. Second place is better than nothing. But it's okay. But it made me think how very much the importance of that connection and the establishment of that tie or connection creates for them this, as part of their identity. When I consider identity, what it means when you consider thinking about yourself as a mother and father too, the growth and part of that process within this connection that allows them to feel safe or secure. I would imagine that feeling for them, and I can't imagine what it was like. I forget what it was like when I was their age, thinking about my parents in that way. But it was very moving. And I want to make a note of that, because part of that development requires essentially what you can offer to your kids. And a lot of what you can offer is what I made mention previously, presence, in the form of, for example, being there, presence, listening. And I had this conversation today with a couple of grandparents. They were wanting to know how to discipline their 15-year-old. And I had made mention before that is the go-to, that is too readily, easily considered. But all the while, we have to understand with kids, there is a complexity about them, and there are many dimensions that define and can define aspects of their identity or personality. For example, emotional intelligence, right? Relational intelligence, social intelligence, compassion, intellectual, humility, intelligence. So when I think of parenting, any parenting style, whether it be conscious or conscious parenting, if you can instill a sense of security and safety and understanding and wisdom, despite what they think, despite what they feel, they'll find their way, as long as you create that setting for them. I think it's especially important to consider that as a conscious parent, because it is a time where they're developing. And part of that process requires one part focus, but thinking through what is important for them. And I would tell parents that's why it's crucial not to judge what they say, although it may be disagreeable, or maybe it seems disconnected. In this case, the grandparents wanted to punish him, the 15-year-old, because they were concerned about his suicidal thoughts. There's more at play there than the act itself, or in terms of consideration. This boy or this adolescent considering suicide, it should indicate to us immediately, first and foremost, when children go there is certainly detachment in meaning and purpose. And I think we all need that to some degree, whether we're attached to somebody or some idea or some religion or some. But for kids, it's religion and all that is more important for adults than it is for kids. For kids, they're biologically built to attach to you all, to parents or providers. And in relationships in general, they continue to mature and develop. Peers become gods at around 10, 11, 12. I was going to say a lot of kids already are reaching puberty at 8. I work with a couple of girls who have reached puberty there. So they're finding their way, and if we can pass or practice epistemic humility, which is like an awareness that we don't know everything. So, and the humility component tied to that, it does allow for us to listen better and judge less. The judgment and the judging, whether it's judging in general or our kids, will always arise. But luckily, this is your 4th class, conscious parenting, you understand epistemic humility, understanding that you may not know everything. And so therefore your response to parenting is humility and compassion. That would be a great response. So here I started out by stating that your children are evolving with you, and they are also devolving with you as well. So whatever your struggles are, so too theirs. And that becomes an aspect of their personality. Epigenetic inheritance of psychopathology, that's a concept that states that a lot of our genes that are good or bad are passed on to our children. We also pass down social, emotional, and psychological psychopathology, and that is done mostly through interaction or engagement. So I talk about the importance of intersubjective awareness. And intersubjective awareness is just awareness of this connection and in the form of whatever communication or paying attention, staying present, and noticing how you're responding to your children. So consider if your practice is such that you're wanting to be better parents, you're starting in the right direction. Because we know that insight is built from just having that notion or idea that I want to be a better person, or I want to be a better parent for my child. So insight, elusive as it may be, starts with that. And then the second part of that, what that leads to insight, is the part that you actually work through your interaction with your children on cultivating insight for yourself, and then which helps you better understand your kids. And you notice that in the past 3 weeks, now 4, I've made no mention whatsoever as a key aspect of parenting discipline. If anything, if you recall, I think it was my second talk, I had a slide that stated conscious discipline that pertained to the parents, not the child. I am a believer, And I do this in my practice. Staying present to the child, listening to the child, in any form of discipline, in terms of my response. For example, I'm human, right? So I get agitated with the kids I work with too. So the discipline comes in the form of recognizing that I'm having whatever that response that comes out of me next may influence this child one way or the other. One way that I may not want them to be. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to go too much into this. You may already know this. One in about 4 kids or 5 kids show a mental illness or can be diagnosed with a mental disorder. So what would you have? 25 kids here, 24, 20? About 4 or 5. Likely, if I were to assess them, struggling with a clinical diagnosis of mental illness. So it doesn't mean the other 15 are not struggling. Remember, they're trying to find their way in the world too. And they trying to make sense of how they fit in the scheme of things, whether it's within the family system or within the school system or within society. Something to keep in mind. So because they struggle, all the more important reason why we need to sort of provide that support. We are the support system in the most crucial because of that biological connection, that desire to, or that connection rather, that allows them to develop and grow is done through us, first and foremost, and also for the rest of our lives, or their lives too. Now, children are born to engage in learning. You recall that slide where I said, let them play, let them play, let them play? You're shaking your head, yes. Do you know why it's important to let them play?
Well, it's how they learn.
Yeah. It's how they learn. That's how they learn. Yeah, true. So that the grandparents, the punishment for that 15-year-old that was thinking about suicide was removing all electronics. Now, for adolescents, that's how they play. I'm talking about your adolescents from the age of 7 and up. That's how they play. That's how they communicate, and that's how they connect. You find that when you remove that, there are maybe a couple of reasons why they have a hard time. One is that's their social support system through peer connection. And the other maybe because they're addicted to it. But keep in mind, I think we all have some kind of just be mindful of our own. Each time when a parent or a grandparent tells me, what do I do with my kid? Because I'm a conscious parent, I try to recommend or suggest something, but I have to always go back to the parent or the grandparent. It's like, keep in mind how you're responding to this. And to those grandparents, I said, what good is it that you, in purpose, that you're removing all the electronics? Help me understand what the intention is. Okay, so children are born engaged in learning. Okay, and they're learning through their play all the time. We just don't see that. I think sometimes we get lazy thinking. It's easier to judge. It's ready for us, right? And we get lazy thinking. And I only say that because I know it's hard to think about these things. I'm like, what should I do next? When my child does that. And parents tell me too, that just sounds like a lot of work. Like the example of my daughter Jasmine, when she wrote on the wall, I went to my room. I took 2 pieces of paper. I took a box of crayon. I walked over to her. I placed it on the floor. I took out the crayons. and I did my drawing on the piece of paper. Jasmine did her drawing on his piece of paper. So it's just a lot of work. It's easier to say, stop! What are you doing? Right? It's easier. So, but it's very rewarding later on for you. It becomes much easier. You believe it? You believe it.
I've experienced it from one to the other.
And why do you laugh?
Because it's funny to me.
So the conflict, you've heard anger begets anger, right? So conflict that arises that you create through your authoritarian style of parenting, you're actually setting them up for that same kind of mindset. That's why you have conflict. So there was this psychologist, through his experiences and research, indicated to us that there's no such thing as this teenager angst that we so impose on our kids. It doesn't exist. We prep them for that moment throughout in the terrible twos and the horrific threes, the sassy sixes, and all of that doesn't exist. But think about that, having that conceptualization that is potentially a false truism, the belief that that exists, and therefore we're kind of anticipating that, but on the side, in anticipating for that to come, we have this angst ourselves, and we're like, I want to make sure this doesn't happen. I want to make sure that my child's respectful. I want to make sure that my child's listening to me. I want to create, instill that in the child, inoculated in the child, and the child internalizes that and then identify that. To some degree, if you look at your kiddos, you examine them very carefully, they are like you. Creepy, huh? Yeah, they're like you. Where do you think they get it from? Their attitudes, right? So, shift that. You're from now on, as a conscious parent, you're about gratitude, right? No more batitude, as my kids would tell me. To teach, and there you go. Do so in the context of fun, play, and engagement. Guess what? What's today, Wednesday?
Yeah.
I get to be here tomorrow. All day. Kids tugging on me. Dr. Tran, you want to play? Dr. Tran, let's play hide and seek. Dr. Tran, let's do this. Dr. Tran, I want to draw. Dr. Tran, you want to play checkers? Dr. Tran. How awesome is that? Right? And I just go along. I was like, sure. How about Dr. Tran do this? Sure. Sure. Go along. You know why? Why is that significant? I want to see that happen, right? In the context of that intersubjective connection and communication, we're going to see an evolution. And I get to be a part of that process. How amazing is that, right? Okay, I'm going to go back to parents. How many times they have asked for that from us, right? Or go to the park, or can we do this? Or they're like, I'm too tired, tomorrow I have to work, or whatever. Oh, I have to watch my episode, TV, but I can play with you after. And then you don't play, Think about that. What we're missing out. And Jasmine, during the summer, she's like, Dad, I want to go to Kendrick Park. Here I am typing away this assessment that I need to do. I said, sure, let's go. Go. It's the one moment that we get to see this miraculous process occur and happen, and you get to be a part of that, and you become a part of that process. You think about that, their development as they are developing their identity. Build calm on concepts they enjoy. Okay, these are some of the qualities that you want to instill in your child, right? Instead of preaching and teaching, you do it in the context of activities, play, not just play, but activities. I put an example I've done when Jasmine was first exposed to this wonderfulness called hot chocolate. And she was just 3 years old, and I would just slowly, and then that 3-year-old, yeah, and over time she gets better control of all of that. So just instilling that in communication, right? Having peace talks. You want to instill calm, have the child speak and talk away. And you're just there. You're a one giant big ear. And you're just listening. And you're paying attention. The longest peace talk Jasmine has had with me was 3 hours. Oh my goodness, 3 hours. And I was exhausted. I'll be honest. That's Wendy, you're laughing, but I think you can relate to this. 3 hours. She came out at 9 o'clock in the evening while I was watching Lost in Space. That's my show. That's my episode. So she comes out and said, Dad, I need to talk. We need to have a peace talk. And I said, sure. Turn it off. I'm like, damn it. In my head, but you're so conscious. You transform damn it into, this is a thing of beauty. And at 9 o'clock, she was done at midnight. Who just took a breath? That was a breath of calm, wasn't it? Or was it?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that, Ellen? What were you thinking or feeling?
I'm just thinking about a 3-hour conversation. Like, I can't imagine all the things she must have processed with you. And then knowing how quiet and not responsive verbally you are, like her ability to just probably talk herself through all the things, and then to see her get to the end of 3 hours and you just be like, oh gosh.
I'm wondering if boys would talk as long. Like, I'm just, because
Right?
girls have a tendency, I don't know, in my opinion.
Absolutely would. And you know what? Actually, Ava wouldn't. I'd get 3 words out of her and she'd be done. But Corbin and I could probably hang out for 5 hours and you'd still wouldn't be done.
No,
When my grandmother became pregnant with my uncle, my grandfather was relieved that he was going to have a son who wouldn't talk as much as his daughter. But he did. Took him fishing.
Whoops. Isn't that
It was worse.
isn't that magnificent though? Yeah.
They are all their own.
Yeah, whether it's 3 hours or Ava, just 3 words or sentences, even if it's just that moment, with Ava, I'm so waiting for her to come to me. Sometimes she'll come to me when I'm here and say, hi. I'm like, oh yeah, it's coming. And then she walks away. I say, damn. And then Maya comes along and and those big eyes. Yeah, she'll tell me how it is.
Every little thing.
It's gonna be all right, right? Here we go. Yeah, and I'll take that, right? And I know tomorrow she's gonna come to me and say, "Hey, you want to play?" And tomorrow I'm gonna volunteer. I'm say, "Heck yeah, let's do this." Okay, so build calm or kind or compassion in or gratitude in the context of whatever that activity is. If you start early, they will become a master like this girl right here. Wait, you see it? Oh, you barely see her. Master like this 2-year-older. In Asia, they have kids just sitting at 2-3 years old in meditation that way. Okay, the brain develops in response to the environment. And furthermore, here's my conscious parenting. You are the environment. Yeah? I think that they're speaking in general, but there are specificity there. You are the environment. As a parent, you have a lot to offer there. So keep that in mind with every new, experience. There are new neuronal connections that is made. If you practice calm, poise, it is consolidated in your child because they take that information, it is impressioned in their brain, and they become it. Yeah. Is that pain and agony?
Thanks, Corbin.
We hope, right? Because we're conscious parents and we're like, yes, maybe they can find a place of wisdom and all that. Yeah. So keep that in mind, okay? Regression in the service of the ego is an expression. Regression in the service of the ego. Okay, could you please keep in mind this? When you hear crying, or that may not be crying, just maybe joyful exuberance, yelling and screaming. When you hear crying, yay! Applaud that and encourage that. When you see a tantrum in the middle of Walmart, in the aisle, yay, encourage that. Remember we talked about that as being a form of communication? Yeah? That as being a form of communication, you see that? Without even having to say anything. Just quiet and very respectful, as always. As always. Regression in the services of the ego occurs to all of us. I will argue more adults than children. Sometimes I wonder. Yeah, because I work with parents and grandparents and teachers and principals who had it up to here. Yeah. So we regress too. It's called, remember, I refer to it as a tantrum. And you have to be mindful of that. What happened?
The tantrum.
Yeah. Can you relate to that?
Yeah.
Can you relate to that? Have you ever seen parents? Yeah, okay. So that's where we have to go. We have to ask the experts, the real experts, right? Kids, remember the list of inquiries I shared with you? Dare to ask. What is it that I can do better this month to make myself a better parent for you? If you can ask your kids that, and if you don't ask and it makes you feel too vulnerable and you're feeling insecure, ask yourself that, yeah. So that becomes your mantra. What is it? After a while, I told you I started when she was 2, and then my daughter, and then at 7 I stopped because it was getting progressively more painful. So, but then I kept asking myself, okay, where do I suck as a parent, you know? And how can I suck less? Because I will always suck, right? And I teach it.
She actually just said that she was lucky in her parents, like just a little bit ago.
Yeah, I think we all heard that.
Yeah.
We did. She was talking about how amazing you both were. So
Oh, what
you're
was
doing
it?
some things right, at least.
See, I don't get to, I do get to hear that because she's person, yeah. That's awesome. Regression in the service of the ego. I'll give you some examples where you suck, right? Now, I shouldn't be saying this because there are kids amidst us, right? But you must ask your parent for permission to refer to them as that. Mom, you're sucking right now. You know, Dad, you're sucking. Look at this. I want to talk about healthy regression. So regression, when we think of that, it's not just reverting back to a 2-year-old, which we have a tendency to do sometimes, right? There are healthy regression too. And a lot of it is okay. Did you know when a kid is on the 7, 8, whatever, 9, 10 hours, they're regressing? Right? You would like for them to kind of put that down and communicate like a human being. But that's their go-to. And I get it. You know, the obsession and all of that, true. But who here does not regress? Look at this. We all sleep, right? Yeah, nice hot bath. Yeah, you're like a 5-year-old at that point, right? You're like, yeah, you're enjoying this. Eating itself is a form of regression. You remember your first date? Ever? Or maybe you don't because you're old. And takes you out to dinner, your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're pretending to be modest, yeah, because you don't want you want to eat too much. So, so eating is a form of regression, right? Or eating excessively, right? Form of regression to soothe, yeah. Or watching TV, Okay, that's what I do. I love that. TV's my go-to. And YouTube. On your phone. Oh, okay. Maybe that too. Getting a massage. Okay, if Vivi was here, it would be like that, okay? She loves massages, okay? Any way she can get it, just massage. Massage her eyebrow, she loves it. Just anything. Hanging out. Have you ever hung out with your friends, right? That's regression from regression, so it's not a bad thing. So those are healthy things for both your kids and yourself, and that's okay. You see that, the acceptance? It kind of shifts your perspective quite a bit. Here I am telling you be okay with a child having a temper tantrum in the middle of Walmart. Yay, applaud that. Because the child's communicating. That's the child's way of communicating, right? So we want to take ourselves out of that for a moment, the personal, and you may be inclined to sit on the floor with the child. And then extend the hand in kind. Let me know what you need. Let me know when you're ready for me. And if it means that the child's still having the tantrum, an hour, you sit there for the full hour because you're such a conscious, you're so zen, right? I heard responses. I see responses there. You will be, because you're going to practice and practice full and complete, we call it radical acceptance of what is this moment, allowing the child as is. Yeah. Isn't that cool to be able to think like that, though? No pressure, no conflict, no tension, no. Yeah. Can you do it?
I've done it. I don't know that I can do it like consistently every time, but I've been practicing, and it does feel better.
Do you understand why it is important for the kiddos?
There's a lot of modeling happening.
Yeah. It teaches them that they're allowed to feel whatever it is they're feeling too, and that it's not going to change your perspective of them.
It teaches them to sit with emotions that are negative.
Yes. You gave me goosebumps. Yes. Essentially, what you're doing through that modeling and allowing them is you're teaching self-regulation. That's exactly what you're doing. How powerful is that? But in the context of that, consider for a moment the levels of, or the kinds of awareness or intelligence that is forming, like emotional intelligence. Yeah, when you can sit for 3 hours, right, with your child just rambling away, yeah, freely expressing. Consider relational intelligence. The child's ability to see themselves through you. Consider. So, relational intelligence, the child's ability, just by looking at you and how you respond to them, reflects back in them who they are. Did you follow that? Yeah, that's why I sit and zip. That's my mantra, sit and zip. Because I know she's soaking it in, my response, okay? So consider environmental intelligence, the recognition. Don't we want that for our kids? Because we call it respect other people, respect people's stuff, respect. So this, the definition of this environmental is to be respectful of other space, situation. Yeah? Perceptual intelligence. Yeah. Interoceptive intelligence. It is the kind of awareness where they are aware of whatever is arising within. It could be a form of emotion, a thought, or sensation. And that recognition of that awareness, once aware, they take that and they transform it into calm. I think we're all capable of this as adults, right? And kids to a degree, but they need that modeling to consolidate, right? So one more time, interoceptive awareness. Awareness of the existing experiences, internal experiences within. Like the experience of anger, right? Agitation, right? Heart palpitation, difficulty concentration, concentrating or focusing. So recognition of these internal experiences, then what makes it intelligent is that capacity to, once noticing those experiences, you're able to regulate it, self-regulation. That's why. So when I say it's not just sitting there for 3 hours and listening, right? It's creating this for the child. You're modeling this. A child at the age of 4 measured the capacity of learning, genius. They're genius. That's why these kids young, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's like, how did they learn that? You've ever gotten or become surprised? Like, how did they know that concept? Or where did that come from? Yeah. And this is why Wildflower is significant in that way. As I watch, like tomorrow I'll do again, as kids are interacting with each other. Like today I came 30 minutes early, and I was like, is this not amazing how they're interacting with it? The big with the littles, and the littles with the littles, the big with the bigs, and how they're engaging with each other. It's just miraculous to me, because I'm all about developmental process, and what quicker and a better way than have the kids interact with each other that way. Now the adults, Miss Ellen, Paul, guide them, and they allow them. For example, I've heard Paul say, well, why don't the two of you try to figure that out? Collaborate and figure that out. So there's a lot of genius in that, because when you think in terms of developmental process and allowing that process to occur, you have to provide them the space. Right? So at public schools, mainstream schools, that just does not happen, because we're authoritarian figures. I used to be a teacher. I was an authoritarian figure. Hey, you need to calm down. You need to, the way I was taught. So at 4, they are like operating at the gifted level, the genius. It's like they pick up things quick. The vocabulary too, check this out. At 5 years old, they had 2,500 words they already learned. I know you didn't sit down with them with a dictionary, right, to learn that many words? Right? Or did you? Maybe you did. Please don't. But that's a lot of pressure. Don't worry, they'll learn it for you. Okay, so. What was the word today? Exaggeration? Yeah. It's so brilliant. So they read from a card, and it's in the form of a question, and they have to respond to the question. But there's a word or concept in there that may be more complicated for a 5, 6, or 12, 15-year-older. But then it defines that word. That word today was exaggeration. And it was defined, and then they concept, and they're helping each other. Light. All right. You are not directing the stream of consciousness a particular way. Well, we're trying not to. I'm being a bit authoritarian when I tell you, you are not. You're trying not to, but we all can't help it, because we want the best for our kids, right? So we feel like we need to instill our amazing wisdom. We already know you're wise, so you don't need to show off. your kids have to develop their own wiseness, and they'll find their way. And to some degree, because they have this experience here, they will become all the more wiser. I wish I had a school like this when I was little. Your job is to step into that stream and flow along as they teach you. So as their stream of consciousness flows, whatever direction, and it doesn't have to be the color you want it to be, because they have their own thinking that may oppose or contradict a lot of what you say. But that's okay too. Radical acceptance, letting it be, they'll find their way. Emotional intelligence, here are some of the forms of intelligence that are important. You know, adversity intelligence, that's why we have to be careful about trying to save our children. So I think it's better for those grandparents, instead of punishing them, in an attempt to teach them a lesson so that we can, they were concerned, obviously, we all would if our child was in that position, but the attempt was trying to save him, and to do so by getting him to think. And to do that, you got to remove everything. So he's in his room thinking. No electronics, right? So the logic makes nonsensical sense, but you don't want to save your kids. So if they're playing by a nest of wasp, let them play. They'll learn. Adversity, right? They're climbing a tree, let them climb. Yeah, they're playing jumping. I see the other day, Monday, I was waiting in the car for Jasmine, and I see two kids out there jumping and splashing in water. Muddy, right? That's what I'm talking about. Oh my God, the clothes, messy. Our immediate response is, this is going to be a lot of work. So let them play. It's a part of the process of developing probably the most important form of intelligence, although I always say one of the adversity intelligence. It will set them up for life. Yes. Yes, that's exactly what that is. Resilience. I wonder when I speak to parents if that part of them is missing. And part of the desire and need to save, I think to some degree, you see where I'm going with this, there are aspects of us, because the fact that you're here, you're conscious, you want to be here and you want to know, I'm thinking or learn. So the part of that is you don't want them to be like you in some ways, right? Or maybe you do. But there should be a part of you that must take into consideration that you are flawed, because your practice, epistemic humility, allows you to understand that your knowledge of parenting may not be sufficient. So what you do is allow them to be. They will cultivate the capacity for adversity. And that's also the genius in this type of schooling. They are free to do whatever it is, and however they fail, they're going to learn from that. And you don't have anyone standing over them saying, what you're doing is wrong, you need to do it this way. So I hear Paul and Ellen said, well, what are some other options that you can consider? So they've said some version of that. Attentional intelligence. So attention, we don't think of it in the form of intelligence, but we want that for our children, right? You know how we teach it? Hey, pay attention, right? Invasive, right? And coercive, right? When you're smiling, yeah? Who hasn't said some version of that, right? Yeah. So attention intelligence, ironically, of all the forms of intelligence, arguably all of them are important, is considered probably the highest form. Attention is considered the highest form of intelligence. Now consider what that means in the space of attention, why it is important. So when I listen to a kid in therapy, for that 45, 50 minutes, I'm just paying attention, noticing. How many kids who have difficulty with ADHD or attention struggle, right? They don't learn emotionally, they're backwards, socially, intellectually, academically, so they're backwards. They struggle terrifically. Now, in the context of relationships in general, whether with your child or your spouse, crucial the process, attention. When my wife speaks, Vivi speaks, I pay attention because I have to, but I pay attention. I really need to pay attention. And I will come back with in my head, or I would say to her, am I hearing this right? You're saying to me that I suck as a spouse today. And of course, she would never say that, only implied, right? So I have to ask that question constantly. Or I challenge myself, what is it that I can do today, right now, as she's expressing her discontent, that I can be a better husband for her? What is it that I can do? Right? So paying attention in the context, you're taking information because you're attending. You're processing it. That information creates a solution, consolidating that, and then, so that's why attention is considered the highest form. Without that, we will suck as parents. It will be difficult because we're not hearing what we need to hear, the story behind the story. We're not hearing what needs to be heard. Okay? And then compassion, intelligence, the highest form of intelligence. I consider that one of the, if not the, compassion. You know what compassion is, right? What does it look like? How is it manifested? I asked a parent one time before. He told me that he considers he has high level of attunement and compassion. And when I asked him, how does that look? What does that look like? How is it manifested? He couldn't respond. So I'm asking you, how is that manifested?
Seeing the suffering of others and then acting in a way to try and alleviate their suffering.
You just provided the two important processes that define compassion. One, the recognition that others suffer. That's why you just sit and listen. Every human being, 100% of us, all 7.5 billion of us on this planet suffer. So you sit and you just pay attention to the child because you know your child's suffering. To some degree, your child's suffering. So that's the first part, the recognition, and that's why you're all ears, right? The second part, what makes it suffering is your capacity to alleviate or assist in alleviating that person's suffering. Now, it can be in the form of an act. That's why compassion is considered more of a movement than a trait. It is considered an action. Or something as simple as listening. Wendy, here you go. Cultivating resilience, fall in lines with the adversity. But let's talk about some points, finer points. Acknowledge the feelings. These are ways that you do so. So here I am paying attention to this kid in therapy. I want to cultivate resilience. If anything that I can offer now, thinking back, my friend asked me before I had Jasmine, Vivi was pregnant with Jasmine, what kind of father or parent do you think you will be? At the time, I did not respond. I said, I got to think about this. But if anything I could pass on, it would be resilience. And I will do so in these conditions. Acknowledge their feelings. Respect the thoughts. There you go. Allow them to suffer. Give yourself permission to let go of whatever ails you, expectations, demands. Set boundaries for yourself. This in the child. I think this is a neat one. That give yourself permission to let go. It's hard for Vivi to see Jasmine climb the tree 30 feet up, and sometimes she'll have to walk away or back into the home. Giving herself permission to remove herself in this case, but letting go of any expectation or demands. Okay, I'm moving right along. Children will follow your example more than your advice. Oh, you see that? Okay. That's true. They'll take your advice. They'll borrow it. But they will learn much of what they will learn is done so through your demonstration or your example. Speak your child's language, whatever that love language is, which require us to notice, accept, and understand. Raising perceptive children, appreciation for small things. Isn't it cool how kids point out certain things that you may be unconscious about, like the sunset, right? Or the ice on the, or when they're jumping in the water and they remind you that you're intolerant. Huh? Yeah? Is that not true? A child's independence is part of her identity, okay? And it's motivated by 3 factors. And this why, one more time, this school is so effective. Autonomy. Autonomy, I'm not going to get into that. We're running out of time. That's very important. This is for another time about that. Belonging, a sense of belonging is important to them. So that's why another aspect of sitting quietly, they feel a sense of belonging because they feel heard, right? And then competence, okay? So we want to be careful with our language, right? Like, what's wrong with you? There's a sense of competence that is needed, especially for males, right? Women need to hear, I love you. Men can go through their life not hearing it, but they need to hear, I am competent. Like, you're such a good provider, honey. You're such a good father. You're such a, they need to feel, develop, they need to have that sense of competence. Trick them. Go home tonight and say, you're such a good provider. I've thought about this 1,000 times over. And he'll be like, darn it.
It'll still work.
yeah. He's a man. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I'm a good father. Are you kidding me? You're right, honey. And then if you say, I love you, like, ooh. All right, one more thing. Let me see. Individuation process is important to them. They need to be separate from you. Okay, so their relationship that are enmeshed, where the parents are the one constantly and always in control. So at the age of 2, they should be ordering from the menu themselves. Okay, so let them order from the menu. You don't need to. Yeah, and they won't be able to read it. Not likely, unless they're a genius and they're able to read it, but you can suggest. Okay, by 3, you should let them do their own shopping. So if they're school shopping, you can take them to Walmart and let them pick and choose, or let them look down the list or whatever. You want to go shopping for food, and you have them get whatever fruits you need on a list. So by 3, okay. I did that with Jasmine at 4. She went to Walmart by herself. She needed something, And I let her go into Walmart by herself. I sat next to the bathroom where there used to be a bench between the two bathrooms, and she found her way, and she got what she needed, and she came out. So you can do all of that. So it's a sense of individuation becomes part of that personality development. Okay, autonomy, individuation. This is what is allowed here. Any questions or comments? I'm going to actually end it here because we're at the top of the hour.